Hey there. Short lecture today, in part due to the fact that the Obama speech is rather long and I want you to watch all of it. It's important you see a longer example of the speech which places so much emphasis on ethos. And also remember, you have a paper due tomorrow. With regard to the paper, you have until 11:55 p.m. to turn it in via the Assignments tab on Sakai. The assignment is to write a reflection paper on a topic of your choice, applying one or more of the theories we covered in class to an artifact of your choosing, 3 to 5 pages, using APA format. Look up the Purdue OWL website for a guide on that if you have any questions. Use 12-point font, your paper should be double-spaced, and utilize citations for all sources. With regard to what counts as a rhetorical artifact, well, according to a lot of theorists, pretty much anything. But you shouldn't bother with feeling stressed about keeping up with the hypothetical faceless Joneses here. What matters to you? What do you have an interest in? Ask yourself that question and answer it, and then think about it in terms of one of the concepts we've covered. For example, the rhetorical situation, kairos, or the logos, genre, etc., etc. My best advice about picking a theory is to choose one and focus on it. Notice, pick a theory. Pick one thing and really drill into it. Don't try to cover all the bases at once. Don't do a genre reading, form reading, and an ethos, pathos, logos reading while explaining why something is an example of epidictic rhetoric, which the Obama speech is a great example of, by the way. Remember, if you write about something, cite it. Don't write about a TV show without citing the show. Don't reference a news story without citing it, or a book or whatever else. It's good form, it's what you need to do as a student, and it shows how thorough you are. Anyway, jump in the office hours if you have any questions, and those are going to be due at 11:55 p.m. via the Assignments tab. Today we're looking at ethos in a more general form, and seeing how it can be applied to rhetoric now. Since things tend to repeat, there's still a lot of Greek terminology here, and you start to wonder if you're sick of the Greeks yet. All the terms and words, sort of a big thing in rhetoric. I'd take a vote on this, but it's not democracy, like it was in Athens. Okay, yeah, it's more non-humor, but really, think of the terms and the ideas we use without really poring over them or tracing their point of origin. Republic, democracy, assembly, citizenship, etc. Rhetoric evolves and changes over time, yet the need for rhetoric and its utility persists. So that's why you have people in law schools holding forensic debates, for example, or people in schools of government looking at citizenship. What's more is that there are indeed rhetorical traditions from places outside of Greece that are also really exciting. Some amazing work is being done by people who are looking at the impact of rhetoric on Arabic culture, including the history of scholars who have managed to save translations of ancient Greek rhetorical work from being destroyed during historical upheavals. And then you have rhetorical studies focusing on ancient China as well as many other geographical locales. Really, rhetoric's got a lot of flexibility to it, and it's part of why studying it's interesting. So when somebody asks you the question, rhetoric, what are you going to do with that? Feel free to point out that their question is indeed a rhetorical device in and of itself. They're calling on you to defend yourself with words. That's rhetoric. So keywords for today: eudaimonia, hexis, and phronesis. With the Greek terms, there's often a direct contextual application of them as they apply to a certain situation. Remember the bit about Shaq and Aristotle from the reading? Aristotle was talking about a different kind of court when it comes to hexis, or habits. Aristotle might not approve of Shaq's use, but, there's room for wordplay there. So the Gerard Hauser reading. Let's do a brief introduction here. PhD in rhetoric from Madison, Wisconsin, worked at Penn State from 1969 until 1993, and then off the University of Colorado at Boulder. Big into what is known as vernacular rhetoric. Think about talking with your friends outside, people at bars, people at barbershops, cafeterias, restaurants, whatever. Has done a lot of stuff involving the public sphere, which we'll discuss later, but is very much a big thing in rhetorical and modern cultural theory studies. So here's question 1. What is the point of public deliberation according to Hauser? Do you agree or disagree? Why or why not? Okay, and that sound means that my neighbors have turned on their air conditioning. Hauser writes, there is no God's eye view that offers a single account of what eudaimonia may be. And we could use that as a shortcut for thinking about rhetorical arguments as unique and deserving of specific, tailored approaches. These approaches would complement the nature of the rhetorical situation in which we hear them. Hauser's text clarifies some of the broader questions you may have left over from your previous readings, with a succinct summation of the Greek rhetorical model in context. They refer to the rhetor who exhibited practical wisdom, especially the primary public virtue of prudence, as a phronimos. We still seek rhetors who practice what is known as phronesis in their discourse. We interpret prudent deliberation as a sign of their sound character. Now think about that in terms of the ethos of the speaker. How do you see that manifested in Obama's speech? Phronesis, by the way, is practical wisdom. What is practically applied, day-to-day knowledge, etc., etc. Here's an example. I've got, say a quarter tank of gas and I've got to drive 100 miles. I better pull over and fill up. Well, that's just a basic example of phronesis. Hauser writes, quote, "When we consider ethos as caused by the discourse, we look for how rhetors reveal their hexis by the interests they espouse, the values they endorse, and the actions they counsel." Hauser maintains that when we look at a speaker in terms of ethos, we gauge three main habits: mental habits, moral habits, and emotional habits. Remember ethos as it applies to character? Ask yourself how you gauge the signs of mental, moral, and emotional habits of a speaker. A fundamentally important quote from Hauser as it relates to ethos. Quote, "The problem is not with partisan rhetoric, but with insincere rhetoric. Insincere appeals deliberately distort the facts and true feelings, and in this way deceive audiences into beliefs and actions that benefit the rhetor in ways that are never disclosed." So you could sort of draw a line between this and the arguments against the sophist, right? Question 2. What was the opinion people seem to have regarding Gary Condit's ethos in the text? Why do you feel that was the case? What did hexis have to do with it? With the Hauser reading, we can draw three conclusions about how ethos, as an interpretive force, is applied to rhetoric. First, ethos grows from arguments and exhortations that are relevant to the subject. Ethos is not a direct appeal, like Aristotle said. Second, ethos is the product of the interaction between our disposition to respond, our inclination, how we feel about something, as we reveal it in our speaking and writing, and the special needs of our audience. An audience brings their own ideas, preferences, and interests to the table. Finally, a rhetorical analysis of ethos avoids trait descriptions as qualities that communicators actually possess. Rhetorical analysis based in ethos looks at how a judgment is formed on the basis of the speech or text itself. When we think of ethos, we should think of something that resets itself anew each time. Each new situation calls anew for each rhetor to reestablish ethos through discourse. Further into page 159, Hauser argues there's a difference between ethos and ethical appeal, writing, quote, "We need a distinction between ethos and ethical appeals. Questions of ethos focus on the perceptions of the speaker caused by his rhetoric. Questions of ethical appeals focus on the issues raised, or suppressed, and the quality of arguments addressed to them." And here's question 3. How is virtue demonstrated with regard to ethos in Barack Obama's speech? So that's going to do it for today's lecture. Thanks again. Please be sure to get your papers in by 11:55 p.m. tomorrow.